Rebecca is going to lead us, and we'll talk about the case studies. Task 3, and we're going to talk about that, and we still ought to be in good shape for time. And so, and thank you for sharing. I need to make an editorial comment, because Dale and I we hear from our students, but we are removed from your world. So I know it'll shock you all that TikTok was not around when we were principals, and so it's I'm sorry y'all go through that, and I guess I'm glad for my blood pressure that I'm not going through that. So with that, I will say, Anne, will you lead us first?
Yes, I'm happy to. Let me share my screen. And I do just want to say that my students in my alternative setting, I am so ready to go back to virtual, because if you have absolutely zero interest in learning in the classroom, I say then just be at your house, because that caused me no disruption. But in the classroom, it causes me every disruption. All right. So my chapter was on restructuring time. And I don't know if it's necessarily restructuring it, but it's just finding the best structure for your time. Oh gosh. A good schedule must permit the complex construction required for individual differences while maintaining simplicity to allow for easy changes. So I think we pretty much all know, coming from school buildings, that if your schedule can't be adjusted easily for like afternoon field trips or morning standardized testing, then it just makes, just more pain on redoing the schedule constantly. Efficiency and the use of time. So basically, I'm sorry, I'm dancing around with my Zoom people. Well, all right. Minimize the use of non-specific study time during school hours. Minimize the time used for movement from class to class. Enhance available instructional time with the development and implementation of inefficient policy regarding the use of the intercom system. All right, so don't let people use the intercom inefficiently. Which I think people don't really do that anymore. I think intercoms are used to the least amount as possible. And then academic learning time is what we want to maximize here when we're thinking about our daily schedule. I like this phrase, loosely coupled. It says a basic rule for good decision-making in most organizations is that decisions should be made at the lowest level within the organization where adequate information exists for that decision. Loosely coupled, it has in parentheses. The application of this rule to scheduling suggests that students and teachers should have maximum involvement in scheduling decisions. So basically, I think that means loosely coupled with above, loosely coupled with administration. I think that teachers and students should have a lot of input when it comes to scheduling. I don't think that necessarily happens very often. And although it suggests being loosely coupled with other input, I think other input tends to be loosely coupled with teacher and student input, a little bit flipped there compared to the suggestion. Schedule design. There's lots of different designs that they offered in this chapter. Teamed learning communities, parallel scheduling, homogeneous achievement grouping, block mosaic scheduling, alternate day schedules, cafeteria style mosaic schedules. So when you're looking at like teamed learning communities, that's going to be, I worked at a middle school once, where we were in teams. So there was a science teacher, a social studies teacher, a math teacher, and language arts teacher. And the students in that team only went to those 4 teachers. So they might not travel together as an entire class, but those students never left that like little pod or that team. And they say that it's good for, scheduling conferences and problem solving with that kind of thing. But like I've said, I have experienced team learning communities, and I don't think that it lended itself more useful to troubleshooting with student needs or to parent teacher conferences than I've seen in other types of scheduling. If you look at the cafeteria style mosaic scheduling, they're talking about creating a schedule that exists and then the students can actually fill their blocks. Whereas we usually do it the opposite way, where we look at what sections of classes that we need, and then we create the mosaic with that right number of sections. I want to watch this YouTube video real quick. Hopefully it'll work without a problem. Uh-oh, I guess I'm going to have the sound problem. Let's see if I do. Can y'all hear it?
Unshare and reshare.
Okay. Got it, got it, got it. All right, I didn't see the offer. Let me try again.
It's in the bottom left-hand corner of when
Got
you're
it.
picking
I see
the
it. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, now it doesn't want to play the one that I needed to play. Oh my gosh. I'm going to try it one more time.
You're working at 2 companies simultaneously, which is kind of extraordinary in itself, and you have this amazing way of, just talk really quickly about how you balance those 2. I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so the only way to do this is to be very disciplined and very practiced. And the way I found that works for me is I theme my days. So on Monday at both companies, focus on management and running the company, which is, we have our directional meeting at Square, or we have our OpCom meeting at Twitter. I do all my management one-on-ones on that day. Tuesday is focused on product. Wednesday is focused on marketing and communications and growth. Thursday is focused on developers and partnerships, and Friday is focused on the company and the culture and recruiting. And Saturday I take off, I hike, and then Sunday is reflection, feedback, strategy, getting ready for the rest of the week. And there's interruptions all the time, but I can quickly deal with an interruption and then know that it's Tuesday, I have product meetings and I need to focus on product stuff. It also sets a good cadence for the rest of the company so that we're always delivering, we're always showing, where we were last week and where we're going to be the following week. So it's been good, but we're always evolving it.
And you're splitting your time equally between the two?
Yep.
How many hours at each one?
8 hours at each one, and I live across the
8
street.
hours at each one, every day.
So that guy heads Twitter and Square, these two companies that he is in charge of. And I liked how he said that he themes each day, because one of the things with the alternative day schedule is, you know, some high schools and middle schools do a schedule where they have like a Monday, they see all of their teachers. And then on Tuesday, Thursday, they see half of their classes, and Wednesday, Friday, they see half of their classes. Or it might be on Fridays that they see all of their teachers. But, you know, in theory, this seems like a really great idea. And I think as adults, we can schedule our lives like that a lot better. Like, I'm going to focus on these things this day of the week. And then, you know, I'm going to do doctoral work these days, and I'm going to do laundry and housework on these days. But I do think it's a lot more difficult for high school students to do that. So it's just something that it made me, you know, think about. I've never been a fan of the alternate day schedules for high school students, because I feel like by the time they're in their class on Wednesday that they had on Monday, they barely have any idea what they did on Monday. So that's just, all right. Steps in building a mosaic type schedule. So we need to determine the educational offerings of the school. So basically like what you're going to offer, what courses you have, provide an appropriate means for students and parents to review the curriculum offerings and to select courses for students to take. I'm not going to read through every single one of these, but it basically outlines the steps that schools need to go through when they are creating their scheduling. And in the book, it also gave months for these things to be going on, and determining the school offerings. I mean, that needs to start. Hang on 1 second. Sorry, we just got back from gymnastics, and we are always excited when we run into the condo. But this stuff needs to be it needs to start in August and September. Like, this stuff needs to be going on all year long so that schedules are ready when they need to be ready. And I think it's just a constant cycle of what part of the schedule you're working on. And I've seen this botched pretty badly in a lot of schools. And reading this chapter kind of made me realize that there's always a part of the schedule that you should be working on. It shouldn't be something that's saved until, you know, spring. Prepare room assignments. I'm sure we've all been in a situation before where there was two things that are supposed to be taking place in the same room. And then all in all, you know, a lot of people, it says print a final master schedule along with individual. Let me go back one real quick. Right here, the conflict chart. So make a conflict chart to determine the subject that must not be scheduled at the same time. So those of you who have been involved in scheduling before, or you've been to a meeting in a school after scheduling has taken place in that room, like you can just see the dry erase board that has either like literal sticky notes attached to it where the classes are actually going to be during the day, like time slots, or you see a dry erase board with it all written on. There are computer programs that can help with this, but it really did say that most principals just like to do it the old-fashioned way and put it on a board where everyone can see it. I've not ever helped create a schedule for a school. I've helped create timing schedules, but not like actually courses. in specific slots. And it seems very overwhelming to me. And I just also wanted to mention that I'm currently in this alternative school and we have 90-minute classes. Well, I really haven't dealt with 90-minute classes in quite some time. Typically what I see is some kind of enrichment class or some kind of tutoring section of the day that's included to cut the classes down to 75 or 80 minutes. But the students that I work with, it is such a challenging amount of time. And because they know how long they're going to be in there, they're trying to get out the second they get in. And it just seems really counterproductive to me. So after I read this chapter, I actually emailed my principal about it. And we have a meeting tomorrow just to talk about some different things that we could include in the day that would help break it up a little bit for our challenging student group. All right, so I had case study number 1. And it says, as your secretary escorts Mrs. Duval into your office, you are surprised by her appearance. She is well groomed and dressed professionally, but she is not more, I think it's supposed to be than 4 feet tall, and she walks haltingly. She clambers into your chair you have for those being interviewed, and the interview begins. Neither of the other 2 candidates is academically as strong or as experienced as Mrs. Duval. But as you know, Mrs. Duval will be assigned the worst students in the school, mostly boys and a few girls, who either have been retained at least in 1 grade or have had previous assignments to alternative schools for those who have had serious behavior problems. So what do you do? So basically, I kind of just pulled the important clips out of this. You have had opportunities to interview Ms. Duval before the student, before the teacher team has interviewed her. And she's going to be working with remedial students. And she's got a great resume. Like, she's worked with she actually came from working with kids who are incarcerated. So I guess I wasn't real clear when it says, so what do you do? Because I don't understand if the problem is that she's not more than 4 feet tall, or that, I guess mainly part of the problem is that the rest of your teachers haven't had an opportunity to interview her yet. So I say, give the interviewing a committee an opportunity and then talk about it. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
All right, so this is we all know the answer legally. This is more of a hypothetical. What do we do when a 4 foot tall teacher applies for a job in a challenging assignment?
I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh, but I'm 4'11". I work in a high school where the kids have to come through metal detectors and be patted down before they're allowed in the building. So it's just kind of comical to me because that's like the exact scenario that I'm in.
Well, I was getting ready to say, Ann, how do you feel about this? Because you're in an alternative school.
I mean, I think that it's just interesting to point out something like that. And I guess I do understand that when you have like a brand new teacher who is applying at an alternative school and you're thinking to yourself, is this the right thing to do, that I'm putting this 1st-year teacher into this extremely challenging environment, or I'm giving this 1st-year teacher the worst kids in the school? I just know my reputation precedes me. And I know that one of the school psychologists, when I got placed at this school, I've known her for about 13 years. And she told my principal, do not let her go. Like, don't let her get out. Like, if you want to have a good teacher here who's going to stand her ground, you need to keep Anne. So I just don't have a challenging, I've never had challenge, you know, putting my foot down and drawing a line and saying, this is where it stands, don't cross it, that type of thing. So I don't really feel any way about that. But I have been in situations where I'm like, why are they hiring someone for this position who might not last a month? You know, I feel like there's different ways you can look at this. And we've all seen people been hired for a position that it was kind of doomed for failure already. So maybe that's the way I'm supposed to be looking at this. Like, was this doomed for failure? I don't think so, because this lady has a strong background in dealing with challenging situations. But I've definitely seen doomed situations before.
All right. So, and I'm going to come back to that one too. Or what you said about, you know, like first year teachers in challenging situations and things like that. Is there a scenario, and the rest of it, where physical appearance should be considered, although it's not legally considered, should be considered in an employment situation? I mean, if you, as the hiring agent, the principal or the assistant principal, look at this person for whatever way, is there a scenario where you'd say, this person just is not going to make it? Not with what she or he has to battle.
We used to, at the beginning, when I was at Southside, not where I am currently, but we used to take bets on how long people were going to last. And I think that sounds awful, but and it was largely based on what they looked like in the first impression you got from them, as far as personality went. And I know that sounds awful, and I hate to even admit it, but we would, we would take bets on what month they were going to take off, so.
Did you ever win?
Yeah, I did. Southside was a hard place to work. But I loved the kids there. It was just administratively, it was a difficult place to work for a while. But yeah, I always won. Because Tiffany and I we knew people better than the rest of the people in the pool. But I feel bad that we did that, but I don't think you should consider it. But I do think that in large part, not the fact that you're 4'11", and I'm 5'2"3/4", and I worked at the alternative school too, and I worked at Southside, which was worse than an alternative school for the most part. But I think it's got more to do with personality than it does appearance. But you get those rookies just fresh out of college with all their grandiose ideas and all their big dreams and hopes, and they're squashed by October usually. So,
well, and I will also, and I agree. And by the way, your answer is 100% correct. I'm not arguing. I just know that we are human beings, and this is something that as we're talking about here, we've got to get past that to try to find the right person for the job. But I would remind Ann, you said you were 4'11", and I'm 6 feet tall, but if you put me next to like Shaquille O'Neal, he's a foot taller than me. Well, Ann, you're a foot taller than this person. And so I feel very much undersized when I'm standing next to a giant basketball player. And so this person's a foot shorter than you are. And so should that, no, I know the answer, it should not. Could
Well, this
that
person,
come
I
into
mean, we're talking about a dwarf. We have to be.
for 4 feet?
So
Yeah.
a little person, I mean, that does complicate things because you don't know like that many little people who work in school districts. I actually have someone who's significantly shorter than me as a resource teacher at the last alternative school that I worked in. I'm sorry, I got kicked out of that room, so now I have to sit on the floor in here. But you know, I also worked with a quadriplegic last year. So he had minimal use of his arms, but he was in a, you know, fully powered wheelchair. And I mean, he was amazing. I think I talked to Rebecca about him before, but I mean, I worked very closely with a quadriplegic all of last year. And I hated to not still be with him. And right now he's having trouble passing his praxis to stay in high school. So he's not currently a head classroom teacher, but I really am hoping that he gets over that hump because he's an amazing individual. And of course he wasn't born that way. He was in an accident. But 2 years ago, we hired somebody at my last alternative school, and his, you know, his undergrad degree was in mathematics. So that was like my first red flag. Like, okay, so your undergraduate was in mathematics. So he went through an alternative certificate program to get into a school. So he was supposed to be doing that simultaneously while he was doing his first semester of teaching, which just isn't always the best way to be introduced to teaching. So he had absolutely no classroom management. He had no idea even how to structure a unit or a lesson. And he was a nerd. I mean, he had like basically a pocket protector and he was working in an alternative school. He had nothing to relate with these children. And he lasted a week. And then he resigned from the position, from the district, and was like, absolutely not. I'm not going to be a teacher. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that people with any kind of disabilities working anywhere is amazing, but being in a school with the hustle and bustle of the school and being able to be, you know, in a wheelchair or any kind of disability, I really commend those people, and I'm glad that we have places in our profession for them.
I am too. And it's so my last thing on this, and all of you, thankfully y'all don't know me very well, but because if you did, this story would scare you even more. But each year I'm blessed to be able to be on a panel of judges for the beginning teacher of the year competition that NCAT sponsors. And so this past year's winner is a beginning teacher who teaches English at an alternative school. So she's like, what, 23 or 24 years old. And so I, you know, we're divided into groups of 3 to be judges, if you will, and we interview these folk. And so we're sitting there in the interview, and this young girl comes in, and she's not loud or I mean she's just quiet and I just looked at her and I said, how in the world do you command the classroom? But it took like, well, we only had like 12 minutes with each candidate, but it took like 2 minutes for her to command the interview. And so then you figure it out. And she was the winner. And it was an amazing thing. She's in a mountain county. Maybe Haywood, or I think it might be Haywood, or maybe it's Henderson, but it's it's somewhere in the, Asheville region, but she's an amazing teacher. But I think again, you have to battle your biases. You will, I did, and I still do. I mean, we're human, and that, I think that's what the case is trying to get across to us is put your biases behind and probe to find out if this person can do the job, or you will be subject to Stacy betting on how long the teacher will last. So with that,
And what Dr. Lamb said last week about, sometimes it's not that you have all the faith in the world in that person that you're hiring. It's just that you need a body in that classroom.
Right. But I guess one of the things that was amazing about this beginning teacher was surely to goodness she had options. So this is what she wanted. She wanted to work with this clientele, and it was just I might have to look up where she was. Now I'm thinking it was maybe Macon County or somewhere like that. But anyway, it was a remarkable experience for me to get to hear her, and then I'm one vote out of, I believe it's 9, and she won, and she's just an amazing individual. So, but if you go by first impressions, when somebody walks in and you see them, you better back off and get to know them. And I think that's what this case study is all about. And lead us with number 17.
The point of privilege before we move on, the meeting that Dr. Law skipped this afternoon that I had to go to in his stead, the dean announced that we lost 2 of our teacher assistants to teacher candidates at Gardner Webb, because the state, for the first time the last couple of days, has approved for the district that they work in to hire fully fledged teachers with a associate's degree, a 2-year degree. So that's brand new as of a couple of days ago in North Carolina, that we're going to start fully licensing residency teachers with a 2-year degree, with no obligation for them to go back and get a 4-year degree of any kind. So to Ann's point, what we're going to get showing up is going to be less than ideal. And that just took another hit this week, unfortunately. Just a point of privilege. Thank you.
Wow.
I just want to say I came in through an alternative certification program too. I had a biology degree, and it doesn't happen that way every time. I can see where you would clearly be upset though if they're only going to have a 2-year degree.
Right.
That's ridiculous. I'm in South Carolina, so I can't say anything.
Yeah, but you're exactly right. And so to the point, it's not picking the best candidate, it's picking a candidate. Now we're pretty much assured that they're not going to be a best candidate. And so we're going to have to, exactly as Steve says, we're going to expand our mind about what is appropriate. We're going to have to change our view. We're going to have to set our biases aside, because we're not going to get the best and brightest, even more so, I'm afraid. I hate that, but that's the nature of the business.
Well, I mean, I didn't know that, Dale, and you're right, I did not come, but I'll tell you a story of why I wasn't at the meeting. But I mean, teacher prep programs then are basically going to be obsolete in another 4 years. I mean, why would you go to a 4-year school when you can go to a 2-year school if teaching is your dream, right?
That would be my take on that. And that was part of the discussion at PEC, that while they've done that on one end, on the other end, they've reinstated the requirements to get into teacher ed programs. After your initial 2 years, you have to be accepted into a program, and they have put the requirements back in terms of either pass the core praxis or have a high enough GPA and SAT score coming in. And so they're going to make it much more difficult. And as the dean and Wendy pointed out this afternoon, probably half of the group that we had over the last year would not have met those standards or those requirements. So it's going to get much harder to get folks into that last 2-year teacher ed program. And if you're going to be able to hire them after the first 2 years at community college or at a 4-year school after with 60 credit hours, you can hire them. Why would anybody go to a teacher ed program unless they're going to differentiate salary? That would be the only thing that I could see that might encourage folks to, if they pay them less, and if they put master's pay back in North Carolina, that would be an incentive as well. But it appears to me that Steve is exactly right, that 3 or 4 years down the road that our teacher ed program is going to be out of business if this takes hold across the state of North Carolina. The district that was allowed to do this was Rowan Salisbury. And so we did lose 2 candidates from there that were teacher assistants, the teachers that have the 2-year degree. Why would you pay to go to school if you don't have to? So we're, I hate to say this, it's a really ugly thing to say, but it reminds me of the old Lewis Grizzard book, Shoot Low Boys, They're Riding Shetlands. There's not going to be a tall bunch here. It's going to get tough. You folks it's going to get tougher and tougher for you to find people who stick and who are quality candidates. That's what I fear. And but Stacy is right. I mean, even as principals, we knew if the new ones, if they already had the sniffles before hog killing weather about the middle of November of October, and if they were crying, silently by Christmas, you knew you weren't going to see them in the new year. They weren't going to make it. And so that's just a rule of thumb. But I'm afraid it's going to be even a bigger turnover with these folks that are wholly unprepared, that have only done community college. There's going to be a much bigger turnover. But I'm guessing this is an attempt to drive salaries down as well. Just guessing.
Well, and they're going to be like, this is not worth the money.
But if you have a 2-year degree and they're going to pay you $35,000, even though they're not really paying you $35 in North Carolina, they're paying you $30 and loaning you $5. You have to pay it back when you get to 20 years. They freeze your salary for the last from 10 to 20 to pay back that $5 they loaned you. But that doesn't sound too bad if you're a 2-year college graduate. If you got if you've been to a community college with a 2-year degree. And so that's how they're going to solve the problem of not having to give teacher raises, is take people who are less qualified that the salary more fits their qualifications. Except we're talking about the future of children here and trying to teach them. And so, but this is basically outsourcing. This is running schools like a business. Get a cheaper labor force. That's pretty much what we're doing. Since we can't pick the schools up and move them to Mexico or China, we'll do the next best thing. We'll outsource the labor to cheaper labor. That's pretty much what's happening here. I mean, we've already seen that with charter schools. That if you're in many charter schools, if you like it, believe it or not, I would be a hot property, or would have been back in the day, as a what we used to call PAMS, physical mathematical science, as a chemistry, physics teacher, math teacher, statistics teacher. I could, they would have paid me my full salary plus maybe even a bonus, a signing bonus, and got all my benefits. But if you're a PE or a social studies teacher already in charter schools, you don't make the full salary. You make much less. They've already differentiated, and that's working for them. And so now we're going to attempt to pay even less than that if possible. So the 2-year people, I suspect, will be on a different salary schedule. Or if they're on that one, they'll never get off of it. They'll stay, their salary will stay low.
Do me a favor and keep that in North Carolina, okay?
Yeah, it's getting kind of rough here.
Our district is looking at outsourcing bus drivers and custodians.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to, we don't want to add that duty to teacher assistants or put them together because we'd have to pay them benefits. We want to keep them, we want more people part-time that don't qualify for the 37 and a half hours in order to get benefits and retirement. And so that's part of that outsourcing as well.
I read this week that Greenville County Schools in South Carolina is paying their parents to bring their own kids to school because they're hurting so bad for bus drivers. They're
Yeah.
paying their parents a $250 stipend.
Yeah, but I'll go back again to, and I'm usually it's inappropriate, but I don't understand why every parent thinks they have to bring their child to school. I mean, that's a relatively modern thing, that why kids can't ride the bus. I mean, as I tell the ladies in our neighborhood, and they don't much care for me explaining this to them, but how in the world else are your children going to learn about sex if you don't let them ride the school bus? I mean, there's a purpose in that other than just transportation. But they don't seem to find any humor in that. I don't understand why.
Maggie and Ellery will never get on the bus.
And so,
Well,
but
they'll join the band like I did.
but yeah, I suspect we will be phasing school buses out because so many kids, their parents bring them to school already, and grandparents, and we can't find drivers. So you're right, we're heading that direction as well. But a lot of that's driven by we don't want to pay full-time salaries. Yeah, it doesn't matter that we get the pay up to $15 an hour if we only let you work 3 hours a day. We don't give you any benefits, and we don't have a custodian job for you, or a cafeteria job, or a teacher assistant job where you can get more hours than 3 a day, 15 a week. Who wants to do that? And so it's a disingenuous argument that, oh, we're willing to pay $15 an hour. Yeah, but for 15 hours a week. We forgot to tell that part. We have to tell the whole story, as Paul Harvey would say. Paul Harvey's probably before your generations, but these are things, and it's all centers around we're trying to change schools into businesses, the factory model, to make them more efficient, in our opinion. But elections have consequences. You got to remember that. All right, off my soapbox, and I'll hush.
See how much
All right.
smoother, y'all see how much smoother it went when his internet wasn't working very well? Okay, Ann, will you lead us on 17 here, please?
So I'm just gonna sum this up real quick. First of all, it says that Mike has been at this school for a long time. It doesn't say that in those words. It says, for as long as anyone can remember, Mike has had first period planning. He comes to school late every morning because of his avocation, which is raising roses and doing other kinds of hybrid gardening. Early morning hours work best for this, he says. So now you're Mike's new principal. By the way, he's a stellar teacher, whatever. And now you have 2 teachers coming to you within the past few days complaining of favoritism. Well, I just want to say, first of all, if you're Mike's new principal, then you didn't give him first period planning, or you chose to uphold his first period planning. So you either already decided to condone what Mike is doing, or you weren't the one that condoned it to begin with. So I would just tell these teachers, are you kidding me? Why don't you put me up on your priority list, and then maybe you can be one of my favorites too.
Okay.
And I'm going to say, get off Mike's back. He deserves to be a favorite. And after I've been working in the same place for a long time, I expect some common courtesies for me to take care of my business as well. So I think everybody should just strive to get to that point in a job environment. And if that never happens to you in your career, I'm sorry.
So you would allow a stellar teacher to come in late every day while you expect everybody else to be on time?
I would work something out. I would be happy to say, hey, Mike, I'm glad that you love gardening. Can you do bus duty every day? Instead of doing like a rotation, like some of the teachers do, or instead of, or will you be willing to be in the lunchroom every day instead of being in the lunchroom, whatever your rotation is. I think that there's plenty of other spots in the day that I could use Mike. And if he's a veteran teacher, then he's not necessarily the one that's like bogged down in grading papers. I would be willing to work something out. That's what I'm saying. And then if a teacher comes to me, I can say, Mike does lunch duty every day.
So my problem with that as a principal would be the school day for a teacher starts at 7:45 at my school, and school for the students. So first block doesn't start until I think it's 8:10 or 8:15. So he is not only cutting into his planning, he is cutting into other hours outside of his planning that are contracted. And I think that's a big issue as well for clock in and things like that. So I think because like I'm all for teachers going and running errands during their planning, if they sign in and out or get approval, whatever the school has. But I think the big issue is that it's not just during his planning.
All right, so what about our elementary school teachers? What do y'all think of this? Anybody in an elementary school and has to be there?
I was gonna say, do we have this?
Maybe we don't. Are there no elementary in here? So
Yes.
let's think about elementary, where you are watching children from almost the time you walk on campus. I
Yeah,
mean, where's the fairness here?
it wouldn't be fair. My planning period is 40 minutes, 45 if special teachers are running late. That doesn't even give me enough time to go home and come back. And I have to be there for like meetings and all of that. So I don't think that it would be fair, but I'm not going to lie. Like we can say favoritism is bad, but it's out there and it exists and it'll always be out there, whether it be like real favoritism or the appearance of favoritism. That's just my 2 cents.
I kind of agree with Mary's comment about it. It messes with morale across the board.
Good.
When one teacher, when you see somebody you think, or you, even if it's just perception, is getting away with something that you never could. For instance, my planning is first block. But so just to make sure that I got there on time, they gave me 7:30 duty. So I have to be there. But I see teachers walking in because I have 7:30 duty right at 8 o'clock. So they're not there at 7:45 like they're supposed to be. But am I going to run and tattletale on them? And yes, I do want to, but no, I do not.
I just want to add something on that note. So I've been a mentor teacher often. And one of the things that I've done for the 2 people that I've mentored most recently is at my previous school, we had morning duty on alternating weeks. And it just happened to be that my mentees had duty the alternating week of me. And I've been teaching for 16 years. So I said to them, I will do your morning duty all the time. So I did morning duty every day, all day, because I didn't think my first year mentee teacher needed to do morning duty when I know that they're coming in, they're trying to get their head screwed on straight. They're trying to make those last minute copies. Like they're just doing things. So sometimes I feel like, where is the space in our profession for helping each other out and bending the rules? That's what we do for the students. We bend the rules. We take, okay, well, you're a ballerina and you run track. So we're gonna bend your schedule for you. Like, I just feel like we do it enough in society that why can't it be a conversation on the board in a school, just like it would be anywhere else?
I think that's fine when it is colleague to colleague, but I think as principal, it sets a different tone. I agree with you, Ann. I don't care if the man's watering his roses at 8 o'clock. That's fine. That doesn't bother me a bit. But it does impact morale, and it does show favoritism, and that makes people hate the flower growing guy. And then next thing you know, there's animus, and people, and good teachers are leaving because they don't feel appreciated. I mean, that's ultimately what ends up happening. So,
Good idea. But please remember that when you sign your first contract as an administrator, what that says is that you agree to uphold all the federal, state, and local laws and policies, period. There's no caveats to that, or John's roses notwithstanding, you have to do that. Now, here's an idea, and I think I've heard Steve mention this before, and I know he was waiting on this one. What about if we worked a deal out where John stayed an extra hour every day, or an hour and a half, whatever he missed in the morning?
you told us we couldn't do that.
Can we do something like that? Can we do, I'm talking about as an individual building administrator, could we offer that ourselves? No, that would be something that we would have to get approval from our school board and our district if we could suggest that to them. But part of this case is about knowing what your responsibilities and the limit of your authority is. And unfortunately, the limit of that authority is you can't tell him he can come in late. And unless the school board adopts it as a policy, you can't tell him that he can come in late and then stay late in the day. That might be an option, but your school board would have to, through your superintendent, would have to approve that, and everybody would have to have that option. Then all of a sudden, we wouldn't no longer have an early start school. Everybody'd show up about 8:30. If that were an option, it would change the time. And when we get back to the first part of Ann's presentation tonight, there's scheduling rationale has 5 parts. I'll cover this in my half. And they start and they're in the same order, and you can't change the order. But number 3 in that is you have to uphold local policy when we're scheduling, and that the local decides when you start and when you end. You don't do that as an individual school. They tell you your bell schedule, because a lot of times buses and itinerants are attached to that. And so you can't mess with the bell schedule. When you start, what days all those things. So that's local policy. There's 2 other things before that, but just understand here that this may be the best teacher you got, and you may like him the best of anybody in your building, but you signed on to uphold the policies, and you can't change the times one way or the other unless your district said we would approve that. So that's kind of from the legal perspective. But I get that treating everybody equitably doesn't mean treating everybody the same. But again, there are so many issues, but the with morale and other things. But the big one is the legal part. You cannot tell him that he can come in late. You cannot condone that. And if he were to get into a wreck on the way to school an hour late, and it came to light that you have been allowing him to do that, that would not go well for you either.
So, and we'll get on to Rebecca here. I love this one, and I do believe in flexibility, and it has been requested of me as the superintendent and Jennifer, when I was at your beautiful school as principal before you were born. We did it there. We had a 0 period, and we had a 5th period, and I think it obviously is easier to do as in a high school block schedule or even a traditional schedule than maybe the other configurations. I mean, the elementary wouldn't necessarily come into play so much then anyway, but the 0 period offers some remedial opportunities or other opportunities. The 5th period is a great period for tutorials after school. I would go to this teacher and say, you come in at 9:30, which is fine. And you, or you theoretically could say, you're going to stay your extra 90 minutes from 3 o'clock to 4:30, whatever the end of school is, to 4:30 for that 90 minutes. And that's your planning period. You can't leave before then. What this guy is doing is basically telling the world that planning period is not important. And we've got to be careful of that. You know, there's a big public out there that says, so we're paying teachers essentially to work 4.5 hours a day. And if you think about it, and you know, in secondary school, you got three 90-minute periods and then a planning period. I mean, I know it's configured differently in some places. So this public, now, I don't know who would like to change places with you, but in their mind, you're getting paid whatever you're getting paid for 4.5 hours of work a day. And we're saying, and Mike is saying, planning period's my time to water my garden or to run errands or whatever. When every other person in every other business is expected to be at work from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever. And we've got to be careful about that. And so there are issues, and it goes back to what Dale says. You as the principal have to uphold the hours that a teacher or an employee is supposed to work. I do think it can be reconfigured so that you establish a way to work with teachers. But I mean, you know, there are a lot of people that would love to sleep late on every morning and start their day at 9:30. So I think the flexibility that this case offers is a great flexibility. I get up every day at 5 o'clock in the morning. I would have loved to have started school at 7 o'clock in the morning. It'd have been great for me. And instead of waiting till later to start, but not many are like that. But there are some that would like to get their day over with early. We could go on this. The key to this case is, first of all, favoritism will get you in trouble. But the main thing is you got to abide by district policy for hours. That's the main thing. All right, thank you so much, Ann. You can take that down if you will, and Rebecca will lead us on our second go tonight.
While we're moving into that one, please remember, follow up on what Steve said. The state pays the majority of teacher salaries, and that's number 2 in the scheduling hierarchy, and they pay for that planning time. The state is paying for that planning time. They require and expect planning, imagine that, during that time.
Well, real quick, I've got a question then. How do they get away with stuffing us in other teachers' classrooms to watch their classes because we can't get enough subs?
Because the law says that you can be assigned that, but not on a regular basis. But that's one of the biggest complaints that teachers have is about planning time. Every year on all the surveys, I don't have enough planning time. That's one of those fallacies that we have to be careful of. If you did the CAP with us, the 5th of the evidence is you're substituting one, you would find out that if you go ask teachers, they say, I've got plenty of planning time in theory. I just never get to take it because I'm covering class. Now, if that's on a regular basis, that is a violation of your work rights. But remembering in North and South Carolina, we're right to work states, you don't have a union. And, you know, so some administrators do abuse that. But that is paid planning time, and you're not supposed to be covering classes. But again, problem with that is if the money that the district doesn't spend on, if the teacher is out, they take her sick day to pay the sub or the annual leave day or whatever is there. And if they don't pay it out, that money reverts back to the central office and it goes to the general fund. And so some districts, as a rule, Tell principals not to hire subs, just have teachers covers, especially in middle schools and the teaming concept, because they get that money. It's a big fund balance at the end. And so, but that is an ethical problem. That's true.
And it's really ridiculous right now with
Yes,
nobody wanting to
I
sub
get it.
because of COVID. Yeah.
All right, Rebecca, tell us how to market our schools.
Okay, so chapter 15, marketing your schools, it was about principals understanding the community that they're dealing with and who is involved in their community aspect, and then how to market to them. So when we look at schools, well, I got to move everything around. Sorry. When we look at schools in the community, each school's community can be vastly different in terms of who it's made up of. So we all know parents, teachers, students, anyone involved, any business that's maybe sponsoring the school, that's within the community. But from there, it also includes the area where the students live. So anyone living in that area as well, whether they have a student or not have a student going there. So from that, a lot of communities, they influence their school and how it operates with, and they call it sacred ways. So like keeping up traditional, maybe celebrating holidays or bringing in religious beliefs, things like that. And then secular is more modernizing what's going on in the school. Like I know, I think it was in the book where I was looking online, like bringing in the acceptance of the LBGT community, things like that. Also just modernizing and adjusting with the time. So that's been a huge sort of battle within schools, trying to keep the traditional, but also integrating in new. So I found this really, really useful, and it was exciting to read through these. So the hot button issues are different scenarios that principals will see that involves members of the community, just sort of maybe battles or conflicts or discussions that they have to look at dealing with. So in the book, it gives you different scenarios and then tells you how to address them, like religious beliefs. The book said to keep with the school policies. And, if it starts becoming bigger, you may want to look at, trying to seek guidance from the district, and maybe also looking at what the attorney for the district says you should do. And then this was a big one a couple years back with different books and educational materials that you can use at school. And we still probably see, I'm not an English teacher, but I've heard of some of the English teachers at my school, parents have, said that they don't want their child to be involved in this unit, things like that, because they don't like the reading. So, looking at how to deal with that. I know there's a new one by me. I live in Denver, which is Lincoln County, and I was reading that they're building they're selling part of East Lincoln's land. And that was a huge Facebook thing. The parents don't want it sold because I guess, we have a lot of building going on here. They want to use it for growth, but then there's financial issues with the school. So I know the school board was looking at trying to sell it to financially stabilize the school, things like that. So there's a lot that goes into, with the community aspect and who's involved, and then how the daily runnings are going. So then let's see. So you always have your pressure groups. Those are the big loud ones. I was just reading and I was talking with some teachers. There was a big one. I think it's the Mooresville Moms or the Liberty for Moms of Mooresville. They were talking about, I guess all the Liberty moms were going to have a sort of a boycott or a stand-in outside of the schools when they were instituting masks. I think this was the past week. And actually, I guess we had a board meeting and there was a window smashed yesterday. So these are your loud groups and how to deal with them. So always identify them when you're a principal. Don't ever do anything public. The book talked about like discussing everything closed doors, but always having somebody else there. And don't ever make anything like a final decision right then and there within the discussion. Analyze, go back, maybe see, okay, well, if we do this, how can we change it? How can we compromise? And then go through it. Let's see. So you also have your formal communities, and this is like your Board of Education, your state agencies, any federal laws coming down, things like that on education. So those things, those communities, what is set is set. So you have to follow those as a principal. And then to market to your community, there was 2 different ways of marketing. There was the one-way market where you don't really know if the community received it. So like you put flyers up, you don't know who's actually reading them. You send out, like we do a Connect Ed every week. You don't know who's actually listening. So that's one way, is you put the message out there, but you don't know, there's nothing coming back in to say, hey, they've received it. So a 2-way marketing is establishing that. It's also having a focus group to go out and help establish that in the different communities within. So like with your focus group, you may get together like your PTSA. And I know I watched a couple of PTSAs when I was at Ardrey-Kell, and we had always a student representative there. And when we wanted something to go out, we made sure the student did a contact to the students, and then the parents, and then different organizations that were there. So all the marketing was going out, all the communication, the messages as well. Okay, so this is my, this is my first, I'm gonna move that. Okay. I'm just reading the comments. Is there did I miss anything? Oh, thank you, Andy. Okay, so Satanism. So this one goes off of a religious group trying to influence the school because there is a teacher who wants to celebrate Halloween. So it's a 6th grade teacher. She's having a Halloween party and she wants the children to come in any costume they wish. The religious group is saying that they object to this, that they think it's a pagan holiday and they don't teach that in their church, and they don't want their children to be subject to that. So as a principal, how do you respond to that? And I guess, would you take any actions with that?
Okay, so this is again, some of the case studies are reflective of this being not exactly a 2021 book, as we have evolved a little bit with Halloween. Still, I think when we go into schools, we at least see pieces of Halloween being, if we go on Halloween Day, being evident. So I think this is a legitimate question. If for whatever reason a teacher comes dressed up for Halloween, what do you do as a principal? If we had not abolished it to start with. Wait a minute, I gotta see that.
Leah, I remember, I agree with what Leah said. I think in the chat, I mean, if we don't have a policy that says they can't do it, then can we maybe invite this woman to be on a committee where we discuss it, or maybe changing the policy? Oh, don't say evolution in science. But I just, if we don't already have a policy in place, then can we really do anything?
I think that the district, yes, the district would have the policy that would cover us on this. And y'all, you know, it's been 10 years. I know we did not have a policy that prohibited Halloween in Wilkes County.
I know for CMS, we have certain rules, and I'm not in there at CMS now, but I know when I was there, and I think they still have it, there was certain rules and regulations for different holidays, not specifically Halloween, but like what teachers could and couldn't do. So like, there was a couple of Jewish holidays where they started at night or they were fasting, so we couldn't give tests or we couldn't give homework. So I think if it's not in the policy, that it's something to bring up to the board. But if we honor one religion, I think we have to honor all of them.
All right, and so with that in mind, the Halloween day is more, the opposition to this is coming at it from apparently the Christian perspective, that this is not recognizing that Halloween is All Hallows Eve or All Saints Day, but you know, we can't control what churches teach or those kinds of things, or what parents believe. So you as a principal, I think you nailed it. How do you handle this? If there's a board policy that prohibits this, then it's an easy answer, right? If there's not a board policy that deals specifically with Halloween, how do you deal with it if a parent comes in to complain?
I think if there's no policy, then it's up to the teacher, but make sure that the students and the parents know in that classroom that it's optional. And then maybe if that group or the parent that's complaining maybe suggests that they bring it up at the next school board meeting to design a policy for it.
All right. I think it is another example of this thing we've talked about before. You put together a task force, right, to determine what's good and what's not good. A school board would put that together. You know, our other instructor, my coworker here is Santa Claus. The hell are you? If COVID were not in existence, could you go into schools dressed as Santa Claus now?
Yes. Some allow, some don't.
Mm-hmm.
So in Cleveland County, yes. In Mecklenburg, where I actually live, no. And so
and who makes that call?
Pardon?
And who makes that call?
Well, the board makes that call.
Exactly.
In terms of those things, and it's up to the principal to fulfill that, to follow that policy. So there is no policy against Santa Claus in Cleveland County. So I partner with a school in Cleveland County to do the Pictures with Santa to raise money for Chromebooks. That's what we do. And I've got a couple more that I do virtually. The more rural and conservative counties let Santa Claus in. The more liberal and urban counties do not let Santa in. But it's, you know, it's not, you know, it's not, I mean, the books that we buy and I go to the classrooms and read with them are from Scholastic. I mean, they're not about Christmas now. And so the virtual ones that I do, I have my own set of books that I do for Santa. But again, it's, you know, I'm not running over top of anybody to do any of the schools in Mecklenburg. I live in Cornelius, and you know, that you couldn't go to Cornelius and do that. But Cleveland County you can, Rutherford County you can. I did a couple in Johnston. I mean, I can name 8 or 10 counties that I work, but they're all rural counties. But again, it's according to what the board policies have been set there, and that's what you follow. And you can offer alternative activities. This one obviously isn't banned. And so what you can do for those parents is offer their children an alternative activity during that time. And of course, if those parents want to set a board policy or want to be involved in that, you would certainly recommend them to the school district to, here's some potential members for that committee if you'd like to form a community committee. But I wouldn't do it at the school level. Again, that's above your pay grade. You don't do policy at the local school level. You follow policy at the local school level. There's a big difference. You have to remember that. What your job is to follow the policy set by federal, state, and local authorities. That's what you do. And so, yes, I do, wedge myself into the door in some schools, but that has to be worked out beforehand, and I have to go through the background checks and the whole deal, the drug tests, and all those things before I go. And we do, we have to do the same thing any other visitor would do, and to go through those things, but if it's allowable.
All right, so again, the key is that you almost have to put your personal biases aside again, depending on the district you're working in, with Halloween, with Christmas, with other traditional times that all of us, I imagine, have grown up with. And it's the times are changing, as they say, but the key is to know that Dale's going to hammer this time and time again in 603. You have access to board policy. You have access to High School Athletic Association. You have access to state policy, state legislation. You have access to it. Doesn't mean you have to know it all by heart. These are thick manuals and books, but you have access to it, and you need to know it before you go off on a limb that gets you in some hot water. And to be able to address this parent with, here's the board policy. If you have a problem with the board policy, let me give you that address. But otherwise, to me, there is nothing to say that Halloween activities cannot occur at the school if the policy does not prohibit it. And then we need to take care of the child so that they're not exposed to something that the parent would be uncomfortable with. So let's do the next one, Rebecca.
Okay, so the next one is a long one. Basically, you're the principal and you're writing your speech to address the school advisory and the community about testing programs. So some background knowledge is this testing program started with No Child Left Behind. Schools will be certified once they go to the Growth is Med, and testing is next week for the junior high. There has been a lot of negative stuff about the test in the local news, including, and this is the big thing, there's been reports of a lot of teachers just drilling the review sheet that was released with the kids. And you are meeting before, so you stopped writing this because you had to meet with the chairperson of the school advisory council, and he wants to talk about what the media is saying, which he said that everyone he's talked to, everything he is saying in the news is saying is true. So what's happening is that there's a review sheet, it's 2 pages, and it literally has the question and it says the answer is this. So like, for example, it says, if the question is about, that's supposed to be war, the Revolutionary War, then the answer is George Washington. So it's 2 pages of that. He also found out that one of your teachers was out with a sub, and the sub, while they were there, just didn't cover any, there was no like lesson plans, no nothing. It was only just drilling this review sheet. So basically, we want to know, how would you address these items in your speech? And also, how would you address the teachers? Because when you did talk to the teacher whose sub was doing that, he said, that's what I planned for the sub to do because this affects my evaluation. So if the students don't do good, it makes me look bad and it could reflect on my teaching, my eval scores, all of that. So how do you address it in your speech with the community? And then how do you address it with, you know, the teachers involved with this drilling method and this testing?
All right, this was a rather long with a lot of facts. And you know, none of you 10 is in any way involved in testing, I'm sure, in your schools. So if you're the principal and you know these facts, these case study facts, what would you say? What would you say to the teacher?
I would
I
say that
know. Go ahead, Ann.
this doesn't seem like the right way to teach the history.
I was gonna say, I always go by my standards when I teach and when I lesson plan. But I know, like, when we get release tests and everything, I look at the release questions, and I look at where they place them in the standards. And I find myself sometimes people avoiding me around, you know, times when, you know, state testing's coming up or things like that, because there's some stuff I don't agree with according to the standards and also the release questions, either the level or if it even falls within my standards. So I think that if the teacher really feels like that, then that's something that needs to start being taken up in the higher district level. Like, we have a secondary math person in the district level. So with social studies, I could see starting to get the content coaches and get in the district, so then they can start going to state to see what's happening with this test. But I think the teacher does need to cover what the state standards are, even if it's not reflected on that test.
And so in your speech, what would you say? You don't have to answer that. Give me somebody else. What would you say in your speech? How do we address this with our community? How do we address it in our community when the community says, well, they're just teaching to the test? How do we address it with our coworkers when we say we're just teaching to the test?
I think we talk about bringing in professional development, maybe that, you know, we're going to start implementing professional development into different teaching strategies.
Is it wrong to teach to the test?
That was what I was gonna ask.
Oh,
Doesn't make
Lord.
sense. Doesn't make sense to teach one thing and test something else, does it? I don't know. Y'all are the curriculum experts.
I don't really have anything to add except that this kind of combines the two things, teaching evolution and this one, because on more than one occasion, I have said to my students who are taking the biology EOC, if it is an evolution question, choose common ancestry and move on. So I kept the peace by not rocking the boat with evolution and talk to the test, I think so. And that's usually the answer.
So some of the end of course and end of grade tests have been released over time, and certainly some of the questions have. And I can recall whether it was right or wrong. And you folks are more intimately involved with this because I was not in the classroom when I went on my tirade. But when I would have these released questions, and I would show them to community members or others who wanted to complain about teachers teaching to the test, and they'll ask this question, and I'm just handing them the questions. And I say, well, will you show me some questions here that you don't think your kid needs to know? I mean, are there things on the end of grade, end of course tests that are asked that would not be considered important knowledge? Now, I'm the first to say, and all of you are, that is, it's kind of like rote memory work for a lot of people. We're not really getting into critical thinking, are we? But with that in mind, are there questions on the end of grade or end of course tests that students should not know? Y'all tell me. I don't know. Are there?
I think in some areas it depends. So like if a student's in math 1, I think you need to look at the question and not only look at the course standards, but the progression of math. Because if they can't do 1 or 2 questions, it might severely hurt an entire unit in math 2 and continue hurting them in math 3 and math 4. So I think it depends. I know history, and I know was it rearranged or it was going to be rearranged? I don't know if it's rearranged, but they have like History 1, American History 1, American History 2. So those 2 courses link together as well. So I think that's what it revolves around is will this hinder the students in the future and in another course too?
I think Andy made a good point. If we do skill and drill all day, every day, and worksheets, that's bad. But what's wrong with teaching using the best practices, Marzano, doing the right things all year long? And what's wrong at the end with doing a little test prep where we give them the questions in the format that they'll be asked on the test? Now, if we did this, we have 36 weeks during the year. If we do skill and drill all 36 weeks, but what's wrong with teaching the right way for 34 weeks? What's wrong then for the last 2 weeks doing some test prep? And we do want to teach to the test. We don't want to teach them French and then give them a Chinese test. That makes no sense. And so as long as we're preparing by the standards and using good teaching techniques, is there really anything wrong at the end with doing a little bit, content and process, all curriculum, content and process? That's all I know about curriculum. It's content and process. What good does it do to teach content all year long if we don't teach them the process of the test and they bubble every bubble? They just or make designs if they don't know how to take the actual test. So as long as we don't do process all year long, we use it sparingly. What's wrong with that?
I just want to say what Andy said about that helps alleviate anxiety for students. One of the things that I do specifically for that, especially with my lower achieving kids, is I give them test questions that are actual EOC questions, but I always choose the ones that are not as difficult. And then I build them into the more difficult ones. So I give them that, the hope that they can do well. And, I'm all about blowing sunshine anyway. And that's the way I get them to perform for me. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the drill and practice and teaching to the test them like you. I'm not gonna teach them biology all year and then give them a Spanish test. So
But please remember, these state mandated tests, you may not agree with them personally, but again, you have to put your biases aside. I tell our folks in the regular add-on program the first 9. If you're one of those people that doesn't believe that tests matter and that kids can, this testing doesn't accurately portray what they know, I can agree with you. But get out now. This is not the business for you. The reason we have a report card is because we keep score. And that's what your speech has got to say is these tests reflect what your child has learned during the year. We're simply doing a little bit of review at the end in the same format that the test will be presented in. For 34 weeks, we taught them by standards and we used best practices and did those things. We're simply preparing them for the test at the end. We didn't skill and drill them all year long. We only do this in preparation for the test. Now, if you don't agree with standardized testing, I can't help you there because these are state mandated. That this is the corner of the realm. And it's not helpful if parents, blast the tests all the time. Their children don't tend to do as well. If parents get behind these and support these, that it's just kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy as well. So that'd be part of what I would explain. But again, you folks are much more articulate in terms of what we should be doing the first 34 weeks.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. So we're all back together. And that completes the principle. We've gone through the book. Remember, we skipped a couple of chapters because they are aligned with what Dale will do. And so there was no need to be repetitive with that. But I appreciate the conversation of the chapters, and I appreciate the conversation with case studies. So next week, we will begin the case study analyses from school leadership. You're divided into groups. You can figure out how to spend, a minimal amount of time together, but in discussing these so that you'll be in one accord as you present next week the case studies. So they've been reconfigured, as you saw. We just added one case study to each group for the next 2 weeks so we can get the case studies handled, and we will cover the same number of cases that we were before. I think time-wise, we'll still be good, and we will be completed by 8 o'clock guaranteed. So with that, Mary, you sent a question to us. Let's discuss it.
Well, before that, can we talk about, because I read a couple of those chapters in that case study, and it doesn't seem like there's anything to discuss in that next book. It's like they give you the information and they give you the solution to the problem. What will you want us to talk about with those next week?
The idea is to present the scenario, and you're right, there is a solution to it. I think part of the discussion is your agreement with or disagreement with the solution to it. But I think that the bigger discussion piece is the scenario itself. The truth is, I don't know that all of you will read every case study in there. So you will just be reading your case study. If I were you, I wouldn't read every case study in there. I'd just read the ones I was responsible for. So you throw it out there for us to kind of picture the scenario and do the discussion from there. Dale, you've added to those, I think, with how you do it in your MELS, don't you?
Get myself unmuted here. When we, in the second half, what we will do is I have questions that go along with them, and that's normally the way we do that. And you do you collaborate, you do your presentation, you give us the highlight, you answer the question. But then more importantly, and this is kind of where Steve is going with, we want you to reflect on what you learned or whether you agree it's that reflective piece. What did you take away from this? What did you say? Boy, I didn't know that, or man, I don't agree with that. it's that reflective piece that's really where the learning comes through the, you know, we'll do some, again, you'll do some group presentations, PowerPoint of the 4 case studies that I have for you. But the bigger piece is that reflective piece.
Yeah, so, I mean, what these will expose you with, I think, is I mean, they're school leadership case studies, and you know, it's like when in EDLS, I really struggle sometimes getting our students in EDLS to get out of the school-based administrative mode. And what we're trying to do with this exercise is get out of the classroom mode into the school mode.
Change your lens.
It's a different perspective. And many of you already are able to, and already are exposed to a different perspective in your current roles. But, and to that, you would have an advantage. But it's still a different perspective in thinking of a whole school rather than a grade span or a single classroom. And that's where we're coming from. So it's just a discussion. And we'll Dale and I have read these. I've read them now 5, 6 times, and Dale will have read them 100 times. So, but we still learn every time we're with y'all. So it's a fun conversation, and that's what we want, Mayor. It's not, you know, we don't want, you know, a term paper on it or anything, but just talking points from the group. And you know, with what you have assigned, I mean, there's one group of 4, 2 groups of 3. So, you know, the 2 groups of 3 is pretty easy that you divide it up, you know, kind of with one person taking the lead, the other 2, you know, following suit. The group with 4, you kind of have to reconfigure a little bit since you got 3 cases now.
Okay.
All right. The other question was with task 3, right?
Right,
Can I
we're
address-
just,
Can I
yeah,
jump
go ahead,
in on
Dr.
that
Lamb.
one? I want to jump in on that one. The evaluation manuals for both North and South Carolina, basically for school administrators, principals, assistant principals, is based off an evidence artifact system where you write what you did and then you show proof through the artifacts that you generate. So starting from that point, what we have to do in the Mels program is teach everybody that evidence artifact system. The evidence system basically follows a scientific method where you do your data analytics and you do your research to find your best practices, and then your annotated bibliography speaks to, again, the example. You know, if we're doing vocabulary, you know, if reading comprehension is our identified need from our school improvement system. You know, we're required to do a school improvement plan every year, and we have these people who do that, and it has to have certain sections, and one of them is the academic piece. So we have to do a data dive of our standardized test scores, and then we have to do a lit, you know, we identify our most pressing need is reading comprehension. Then we do a lit review on reading comprehension, and everything tells us, well, vocabulary is the deal here. And so then we do an annotated bibliography of the vocabulary. Now, that's the way that we have to do it as principals, because we have to be stewards of the public will here. We have to be able to justify the money and the effort that we spend, remembering that every school has to do a closing the gap. This is not a district initiative. You have to have a single initiative link back again to your school improvement plan that we're going to fix. This is our most pressing need. This is the problem that we're going to address. But we can't do a solution hunting a problem. This notion of, I went to this workshop and I like this program. Well, what does it fix at your school? Nothing. We just like that program. Or, you know, these one size fit all, kind of like, you know, liniment back in the old day cured everything from, you know, baldness to the heartbreak of psoriasis to gout. No. We have to do targeted interventions, and that's the notion here. And when you're evaluated, when your supervisor comes out, you have to show evidence, a written narrative of this is the process that we went through. And if, you know, because we're spending public money and using resources. Now, if you didn't do an annotated, if you more than likely did one and then your previous ones, just say, I did an annotated bibliography. You don't have to do another one or a new one, but we have to know that you know the process, that you're going to be called into question, sometimes by your community, but by your school community, but definitely by your supervisors, who's going to say, all right, how did you arrive at this decision to do this program to meet that need? Show me the logic, show me the scientific method that you went through. You're required to do that. You have to evidence the things that you do, and then they have the acceptable artifacts that would be generated from that work. And so, again, to change our lens as administrators, we have control over local budgets, dollars, and people, but we have to be accountable to that, and there is a process of evaluation of evidence and artifacts that we have to fall within that. And so this helps us to remind us. Now, I know you folks are much more advanced. I'm sure you've done lit reviews and annotated bibliographies. Just tell us that. You don't have to do another one, but you have to know that you're going to have to produce that stuff when you become a school administrator, because you're going to be asked and you're going to be held accountable, because remember, that master schedule and that budget has to support that school improvement plan and that closing the gap initiative. And so you have to show that you've been a good steward of the public will of the money and resources. And that's basically what that means. And so in task 3 of the app sale, if you didn't do a lit review or an annotated bibliography when you did your work, just tell us that you know how to do that you understand that this is what you would do.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, so in the process when we were doing that before, we had to link everything to the teacher leadership standards.
Right.
And we have sections. So could that count in part of that? Where
Absolutely.
we might say that we did our research and here is how it connects. And then by including how the research and the teacher leadership standards connect, could we put that in that task 3?
Yes, and see, what I've just talked about is linking back to the administrative standards. As long as you know that there are standards that you have to link back to, and that's what I was just referring to, the administrative standards. When they come out, and just like the night that I did standards, when they come out, they evaluate these on the standards based on your evidence and artifacts. And everything you do has to link back to those standards. Again, that's how we do things. And so you're exactly right, Jennifer. More than likely, you linked all these things to teacher leader standards. But again, changing your lens, we now have to link everything we do as administrator to administrator standards. And we're held to a higher standard because of the money and people and dollars. Again, you don't want to be seen as misspending public money. And so that's why there is somebody going to come out and hold you accountable to how you spent your money. What did you spend it on? I mean, did you just like this person? Was this a personal friend of yours, this consultant that you brought in? How did this program link back to what your standards were and what your identified need was from your school improvement plan? How does this fit in? In the business, we call it a solution hunting a problem. You went to a workshop, you went to a conference, you saw this thing and you really loved it. Does it fit what you have? No. We hired a superintendent in Charlotte one time that brought Avid in, and he made every middle school do it, except the problem was only 30% of them it was relevant to them. But everybody had to do it anyway, because that's all he knew. It was a major disaster for him and everybody else. But again, he had a solution hunting a problem. They made I told you, they made my wife do it at Davidson IB, lab school for Davidson College. They didn't have not one kid in the building that qualified for Avid, not one. But they had to do it anyway, because that's all he knew. That you can't be that administrator that this is all you know. You have a solution, but no matter what the problem is, this will fix it. Like liniment, horse liniment, no matter what it is, it'll fix it. I know that's become kind of popular in our society. I see all these commercials now, all this marketing that basically tells all these lies in the fine print and says, don't believe anything these celebrity spokesperson told you. This does not fix any of those problems. And but we're held to a higher standard that as administrators. That's a great point, Jennifer.
And I'm thinking, when you say lit review to me, I think of this ridiculous thing that I'm writing right now that's really about
Yeah,
to make me,
no,
okay.
again,
You want me
again,
to narrow it down?
it shouldn't
and
be
just-
one page long.
Okay.
And that's the limit. We do it. It's only got to be one page. And the notion of the lit review, just like the one I sent, the notion of the lit review is very simple. Is we've identified this as their most pressing need. So then we go do a quick lit review on what have people done that have this similar problem in a similar looking school. And they say, oh, everybody, if it's fluency, oh, they did phonics. Well, let's go look and see what kind of programs there are for phonics. That's where the annotated bibliography. Oh, it's comprehension. Well, that's vocabulary. What kind of programs out there that address address vocabulary? You do a quick annotated bibliography. This school did this did that. Exactly. You're just demonstrating to us again. Andy made a good point. You're just demonstrating to us that you know the process. That everything has to link back to a standard. That there is a process. You don't go and process any, meeny, miny, mo is not a process. That you've gone through the steps, you've done your lit review, you found the most common solutions, you've looked at the different programs, and you look for them for a goodness of fit of how well they fit your particular situation. Don't be Harold. I worked with a fellow a long time ago named Harold. He was principal in a little rural school. And again, he did his lit review on what to do to raise test scores the first year that we started doing accountability in 1990. And it said, kids don't suspend kids out of school. Except he didn't do his annotated bibliography and look for a school that had stopped suspending out of school that looked like his school. And so he picked a program for a private New England Catholic school. Where all the mothers were stay-at-home moms, and the program was there. They suspended mom into school rather than the kid out, and it went completely sideways the first day. When in that community, if you didn't work that day, you didn't eat that night. And so the first mother obviously was not very happy to be in school, and she was even more angry when the cafeteria manager asked her to put her cigarette out at lunch, and they got in a big fight and knocked the sneeze guard off the salad bar. And it got sideways from there. And so the notion is yes, keeping kids in school does help with test scores, but that particular way to do it did not work in a school where it was full of low wage day laborers. And if you didn't work that day, you didn't eat that night. They didn't have a bunch of mothers, stay-at-home moms in a Catholic situation where they could come to school during the day. So that's the notion here, is you've got to match the fix to the particulars of your school. And that's what an annotated bibliography does. Every vocabulary program is not the same. Every phonics program is not the same. They work different at different levels in different kinds of schools. We just got to know that you understand that process. And if you do, then write it up quickly and move on. This is not War and Peace here. Remember, you folks have already done that work. We just need for you to, a couple of little things we need for you to know in each of these. And if you got it, we're good.
Well, when you give us a document, for lack of a better word, and we've been traumatized by rubrics for the last however many years of this is what you have to get a 4. And this says you have to create an annotated bibliography. You have to do this. That's our mindset of, my God, we have to do this, but this is counterintuitive to where we are.
Yeah, it is. But remembering is we have a blueprint that DPI, I can't change those. And so but I'm the one's going to grade them in the end. So I think you'll be okay.
Wait a minute. You mean I didn't have to read all those that I read? I want to tell y'all, I'm really enjoying reading your stuff. And now some of it is, to Dale's point, thank you, Dale, for saying it doesn't need to be War and Peace, because some of them are already on page 30 and 35, and it's in task 1 and 2.
Good.
But it is fun to read.
But it's good stuff.
Yeah, it is really good stuff. And we said that to you before. I know what time it is. We're going to get out. This is my 6th time, I think, being blessed to work with EDCI on this add-on licensure, maybe 5th time. I'm not familiar with anybody that went and created a whole new annotation piece. And so you folks, I mean, part of administration, part of teaching, maybe more so teaching than administration, is creativity. Figure out how you're going to display it. A lot of you have annotated bibliographies on Drago Severson and all the adult learning and stuff, or how people learn. You have, you know, if your PLC is on, you know, using TWCS and involving people, you know, whatever you want to do, whatever your issue is, you can plug in some of the annotations you already have, or figure out another way you're going to word it. But it will be great. I haven't read one that's not great. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and I mean that sincerely. I was joking about the length of it, but you know, you can take your foot off the gas on the annotations. Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you want to do a long one, that's fine. But annotations are annotations. They're not going to be long by nature. So this will be your shortest section, probably.
Oh yeah.
All right, it's 7:57. Told you get out early. Everybody will be back together next Tuesday. I know you're sitting there saying, gosh, I wish I had a week. We wouldn't do it. We're going to be through in 2 more weeks, then you get a break. Okay, so just keep your foot going just a little bit, and some of you, just let me know if you're going to be a little bit tardy with the stuff. I'm not a stickler for that. You guys, ladies, have an unbelievable burden on you right now. We understand that. I just want to keep you on a track so that you can exhale at some point, okay? But I have no problem. Just let me know that it's going to be a little bit tardy, and we'll work together for sure. Don't let that concern you. That's all I got. Anybody have anything? Anything else? Ann and Rebecca, thank you for tonight. Everybody, thank you for being with us. I hope the next 7 days are better than the last 7 days. Blessings to all.
Prayers. Night.